Hello and welcome to SweetSpot DFS. I have a review for you guys for the 2021 RSM Classic, where Streb, not Webb, won. This is Robert Streb's second title, and it just happens to be at the same golf course, the same title, or the same tournament where he won his very first title. So obviously Sea Island, RSM Classic is treating Streb pretty decent. Now, I didn't even think about looking at previous winners. Streb had won here in 2015, but I really didn't think much of it. He hadn't been playing that great leading into this. But as a 6K golfer, or even, someone who had super high odds, it's worth playing, if we're talking about DFS, it's worth playing one lineup out of 100, but he's definitely not going to be in a core. That would be... It would be interesting to hear if anyone had him in a core. I might even kind of call you out on being a little crazy for having a 6K golfer in your core, especially someone at 6,300. But either way, Streb won. Let me go over what I'm going to cover in this video. We'll look at kind of a results and recap. We'll also look at the optimal lineup versus the $1 GPP winning lineup, just to see, how close they were to the optimal lineup, actually what the optimal lineup was, and if there's anything that we could have done differently in order to, take down a GPP. I will kind of hint, it's crazy, the difference between the optimal lineup and the GPP winning lineup. Like, just go ahead and skip there if you want to see it right now, but it's worth mentioning. And then I'm going to dig down into the dream sheet and basically go over, or at least review, what we talked about in the strategy video when it comes to creating lineups or trying to create a player pool for this tournament. And there's a lot of interesting information there. Yeah, can't wait to get to it. Timestamps will be in the description. I also have chapter mode enabled on YouTube, so that little red progress bar that's going across the screen, you can see where you are. You can go ahead and just kind of highlight over that bar, and you'll see all the different segments, which are called chapters. And if you click on it, obviously you just go there. So that's enabled. You can see it there. Let's go ahead and get into the spreadsheet. So very first thing I want to talk about are the results. Obviously, you see Robert Streb won. He beat Kevin Kisner in a playoff, almost jarred his second shot on the second playoff hole. Left himself with like a 1-footer for birdie, and Kevin Kisner missed the green, chipped up, hit his putt in for par. Really a formality for Streb, but crazier things have happened. But he did end up making his, it was like maybe 3 feet. He ended up making his putt to win the tournament. So those are your number 1 and 2 finishing places. Cameron Tringali had a fantastic round on Sunday. As did Andrew Landry and Harris English. Harris English was a favorite of mine, as he was many other people. You can see Camilo Villegas was up there, so he made a showing. Camilo is good in the wind. Last tournament he won was the Honda Classic, I believe. So really kind of the, if you want to call them coastal courses, in the wind. Maybe it's worthwhile to look at Camilo. It's nice to see him doing well. His top 10 should give him a berth into the Mayakoba Golf Classic, which will be in Mexico in 2 weeks. So hopefully he does well there. Zach Johnson, Kyle Stanley, some old wily veterans doing pretty decent up at the top of the leaderboard. And I don't want to stay here too long. We're obviously going to talk a lot about the golfers that do finish well later on. So let's go ahead and get into the optimal lineup versus the $1 GPP winning lineup. So I kind of teased a little bit here that the difference between the $1 GPP winning lineup and optimal was crazy. It is crazy. The winning lineup had scored 589.5 points, used $50,000 of the DraftKings money you're able to use. So he left $0 on the table, or she. And that lineup consisted of Kevin Kisner, Cameron Tringali, Harris English, Matthew Naismith, Tyrrell Hatton, and Kevin Streelman, who finished 54th place. Now, just looking at that, we have 3 golfers in the top 10, which is decent, but primarily you want to get as many golfers inside the top 10. Sometimes it's not doable, especially if you're rostering someone of like a higher salary, but you typically want all 6, if not 5, with your 6th golfer in, well, I should say 5 inside the top 10 with your 6th golfer, you know, somewhere between 10 and 20th place. So as you can see, the winning lineup for the $1 short game was not good. And it was one of those crazy tournaments where a lot of favorites missed the cut. A lot of golfers who played in the Masters didn't do so well here. So it's kind of, you know, it makes sense. It was really which of the top guys were able to basically survive and at least provide a little bit of value. So obviously you see a 9-7 golfer in there and a 10-4. So that's basically where you started, was with a 10-4 golfer and a 9-7. Kind of still goes in line with the salary strategy that I implored. You wanted a 10K golfer, a 9K golfer, I should say 10 and above, a 9K golfer, 8K, 2 7s, and a 6. So, I mean, he had an 8, 7, 2 7s, and basically Kevin Streelman was close to a 6. I mean, Matthew Naismith was also close to a 6. But actually, all 3 7K golfers, and then 8, 9, 10. So it was very close, very close. Now, the $1 the optimal lineup was, no one's getting on it, using $43,900 of $50,000, leaving $6,100 on the table. That's never going to happen. You would have to be really bold in order to make a lineup like that. And you're never going to get there with some of the golfers that you see that are at the top of the leaderboard. Like, you're not going to just pair, you know, let's say well, I could say it wouldn't be bad starting with like Kevin Kisner and Zach Johnson. You know, Zach Johnson can be replaced by Kyle Stanley. So obviously the optimal lineup could actually be even cheaper yet. But either way, optimal time for that to show up. Either way, you know, even if you were to start 86 and then go to, say, 8,000, if you're rounding your lineups, you're not just going to go, you know what, I'm going to pivot from Harris English to Robert Streb and leave like 3,000 on the table. And likewise, you know what, I want to also pivot from, say, Jason Day to Andrew Landry. Like, that's just never going to happen. But your optimal lineup, Robert Streb, Kevin Kisner, Cameron Tringali, Andrew Landry, Bern Wiesberger, Zach Johnson. And that, like I said, 43,900. The $1 GPP winning lineup was 589.5 points compared to the optimal lineup, which was 706. So a full 100 points. I mean, 100 plus points between the two. So it would have been, you know, obviously if you could have put, say, Robert Streb in your lineup and then just actually, you know, copy this guy's lineup, it was just that much better. Like, you would have done so much better. But either way, basically, if I were looking at creating a lineup for next year, I would have started with Harris English. I would have probably, actually, we'll get to that part later on. I'm not going to do it here. This is just going to conclude the $1 GPP versus optimal. So again, all the golfers here with the little tick marks in the top right-hand corner, that's your optimal. The $1 GPP winning lineup, obviously those highlighted in blue. I already repeated those names, so hopefully you got them earlier on in the video. Okay, let's get kind of down into the meat of things. I have the dream sheet up, essentially. I'm going to hide some pieces of information. I want to hide this. I do want to keep the sweet spot number here because I think that's interesting to go through. Let's go ahead and put a filter on and go by result. So right away, what I want to talk about, this sweet spot score on the left had a lot to, I mean, I provided a lot of stuff in the strategy video as to what this pertains to. I'm not necessarily disappointed in it because, you know, Robert Streb was actually a decent ranked golfer for being $6,300. Now, Bernd Wiesberger, there's no way I think I get... Okay, I'm missing some golfers. Here we go. Okay, there we go. I think this is everybody. Let me double check. Yep. So, you know, the top golfers here, I mean, Kevin Kisner, 36 is pretty decent. I would like if all of my top guys did well, but as you can see, I have this sorted from top to bottom. Really, the top 3 guys weren't terrible. So if you wanted to, you know, anchor your lineups with either of these golfers, it wouldn't have hurt you that bad. I mean, I had a ton of Webb Simpson exposure. Now, Webb didn't sink anybody's lineup, especially when the $1 GPP winning lineup was scored so low of points. You could have gotten there pretty easily, you know, even if you rostered Webb. So let's say if we went back to that optimal versus $1, you know, say we had Webb Simpson and we chose Webb, which is right here, 69.5 points. Let's say we chose Webb and instead of Kevin Streelman, so let's say we chose Webb over Tyrrell Hatton, who scored 92 points. So obviously you can kind of see we choose Webb Simpson over Tyrrell Hatton, and we choose Robert Streb over Kevin Streelman. Actually, I might have to choose somebody different. Maybe we go something like this. I'm just gonna see what I can do. That's 50,000 on the button. So if we were to go to Webb and then to Harris English, and then say we had Robert Streb, Kevin Kisner, Cameron Tringali, Matthew Naismith, we would have scored $632 points. So obviously we would have beat that $1 GPP. So again, Webb wouldn't have hurt you. Now the purpose of SweetSpot DFS is to find the optimal lineup. So I'm kind of trying to, you know, give a reason as to why the sweet spot rank wasn't terrible. I'm trying to justify it, essentially, is what I'm trying to do. But really, that wouldn't have hurt you. And even if you paired it with like Joaquin Neiman, as long as you had some of those top guys, you would have done just fine. So I'm not necessarily disappointed in the sweet spot model. Sung J M had really good stats. I didn't play any Sung J M. I mean, I think I had him in 4% of my lineups. Tyrrell Hatton I played quite a bit of, and I actually forgot about Brian Harman, despite him having, you know, a pretty good ranking. I just didn't like Brian Harman. Now, would I like to see more of these golfers up here inside the top 20 or top 10? Absolutely. Absolutely. But hopefully we'll have some time to analyze this a little bit more and try to figure if there was an actual way. Yeah, never mind. I'm not even go down that road, because the guys that are inside the top 10 right now, you're not accounting for Robert Streb, Andrew Landry, Camilo Villegas, Kyle Stanley. Those are golfers you're not going to account for. You can even include Bernd Wiesberger. Those are golfers that are just, you're not saying, you know what, I'm going to play Bernd Wiesberger over Webb Simpson. It's just not going to happen. This was a tournament that wielded some different results than we've seen in the past. So it's kind of interesting. And plus, this is the tournament that, you know, went right after the Masters. So those that did play in the Masters, probably a little fatigued. Who knows? But here's the one thing I would say: if we were starting with, if we were creating a core of golfers, one avenue you could possibly take is going Harris English, pairing up with Jason Day. They both teed off Well, they were in the same group on Thursday and Friday. If we wanted to start with tee times, that's definitely a way to do it. You can see all the other golfers that are highlighted, meaning they're either, if they're red, like Robert Streb is, that means his scoring average for this year over the last 7 weeks is below the field average. So somebody at 6,300 looks pretty good. So that is one way to get to Robert Streb. I don't think I necessarily would have, but I did play him in one lineup. So, I mean, that felt good, was doing well, but had a couple missed cuts in it. That one wasn't going to get anywhere close because that's somebody that was at even par and the cut was +3, or it was -3. Just not going to happen. But either way, I think if we were to start with Harris English, Jason Day. Now, Jason Day's bucket is one of the buckets that was really good for this week. So was Harris English's. So it made sense if we were to start there. That could have been done. And then, I mean, it's really difficult to actually figure out where we would go from there. I have a segment I'm going to do right after this where we can actually get there, but I'm not going to just yet. What I actually want to do, so you can see all the scoring stuff up here. You can see the DK points. Here's the golfer information. I would have been a little interested to see all of the Georgia guys that are up here. You know, Zach Johnson now lives in Georgia. I believe he actually uses Sea Island as his practice facility. You know, I guess looking at Southeast, there were a lot of Southeast golfers, so it wasn't surprising to see so many just because the volume alone would have probably promoted some of these golfers to do pretty decent here. So I didn't really so much look at this, but I did kind of just to find certain like 7 or maybe even 8K golfers that I wanted to, you know, make a core around. I kind of went here and looked at some of this region stuff, but for the most part, this is just for me to analyze afterwards. I really wanted to see, you know, the differences, obviously, when it comes to age, official world golf ranking, and then where they live, what type of shot shape they hit. So obviously we see a bunch of draws up here. Unfortunately, I don't have all the other information for like Cameron Tringali, Camilo Villegas, or anybody else, but draws make sense, and we were talking about that during the course history, because a draw pierces through the wind a little bit easier than a fade does. So this might be something we look at in the future, especially if it's known to be windy and conditions kind of remain that way. Looking at course fit information, we can see course history right here. Really, the only golfer that didn't have any course history in the top 10 was Bernd Wiesberger. And no one really had super terrible course history. I mean, Harris English didn't look like he had the greatest, but I'm not going to, you know, say no to playing him. It's just, for whatever reason, he hadn't played here. You know, he hadn't played decent here. And who knows what reason that was. But Harris English, one of the better golfers in the field, did well, primarily because he's been playing well. He's from Georgia, plays this golf course. You know, I think this is one of his practice facilities. So he was well known. Like, he would have known the golf course. He would have known this area. Course history probably didn't matter that much. One of the other things I like to look at is grass stats, looking at overall Bermuda average, recent form Bermuda average. Nothing really stands out here. We have Bernd Wiesberger, who has not played well on Bermuda over the 9 events he's played in Bermuda events. But everyone else is okay. Robert Streb, not the greatest, but he does have a couple top 10s at least. 67 events, 4.48%. Not good, but hey, the possibility is there. And really, I like looking at a lot of this stuff just to see what the possibility looks like. If I were to highlight everyone inside the top 10, everyone has at least 4%, except for Bernd Wiesberger. And really, 4% isn't the greatest, but still pretty decent. And Kevin Kisner, it should have been a no-brainer. And really, that bucket is really good. I don't know why I didn't see that. I thought he was a 2-4, in all honesty. if we look at 2-2s, yeah, I should have looked at this. I should have came here and looked at this. Like, that's pretty good. Kevin Kisner should have been a play that we should have done. But yeah, when it comes to overall Bermuda average, you know, obviously Kevin Kisner has really good Bermuda average. So does Zach Johnson and Jason Day. Again, we could have gotten to those players pretty easy just looking at all of those averages. I want to double check. I'm not sure I used Bermuda in my scoring. Let me double check. I hope I did, and if I didn't, okay, I did. Let's say if I didn't, I'm gonna beat myself up for it, but no. Grass stats not terrible. You know, field average was 50.26. Not terrible. You know, the majority of them do finish under. I guess these are golfers that don't. The ones that I'm highlighting right now. So Patton Kizzire, John Huh, Andrew Landry, Bernd Wiesberger, and Robert Streb. So the winner didn't have Bermuda average below the field average. Next thing I like to kind of look at is kind of the recent form stats. See if anyone was doing, you know, decent. I like to start with scoring average. Field average was 70.54. Well, for the most part, we see a ton of golfers that are doing better than that. So obviously, you would have wanted to kind of focus on some of these guys. Those that didn't, you know, that weren't under field average, that was Andrew Landry, Bernd Wiesberger, Camilo Villegas, and Kyle Stanley, but everyone else was. That's a lie. Kevin Kisner hadn't been playing that well. So 70.54, not 71. But either way, Robert Streb had been slightly. Kevin Kisner, not so much. Another stat I like to look at are rounds under 70, the percentage that golfers have been doing. You can usually find some really hot golfers this way, and it looks like, you know, a few of these guys could have been easily targeted. Rory Sabatini, John Huh, Pat Kizzire, Harris English. Those are all golfers that we could have targeted. Even Cameron Tringali, you know, with that kind of information, could have used it to create cores, but it wasn't the only thing. And again, that is the sweet spot, you know, number over here on the side. It does incorporate those numbers. Another one, you can look at the strokes gained over the last 7 weeks. You know, if you wanted to target one over another, I say always, always, always stick with off the tee. To me, off the tee is the no-brainer. I'm highlighting all of those that have positive off the tee stats. Positive off the tee stats to me is the biggest contributor to confidence that a golfer will have. Obviously, we see Kyle Stanley he was not having a good stretch of tournaments leading up to this for tee to green. I'm sorry, this is tee to green, not off the tee. Now that I now have to eat my words, because what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kind of have to eat my words a little bit, because off the tee does not look good for any of these guys. Doesn't look good for Kevin Kisner, Andrew Landry, Zach Johnson, Camilo Villegas, Kyle Stanley, or down here with Bronson Burgoon. So I guess I could still say, you know, the majority of them do have positive off the tee. But overall, tee to green is a really good stat to look at too, because that is just your overall, you know, before you get to the putting surface, how well you've been doing. So looking at tee to green, yeah, maybe this is just a better indicator of success, where I would say this is a better indicator of confidence. And I don't know really, you know, what really comes from what, but obviously if you're playing well, your tee to green looks good. I'm assuming things are just around the corner as to how you would do well. Looking at season-long stats, I do like looking at scoring average and kind of comparing against recent form average. But the one thing I really like to look at, and I have to admit I didn't even look at this prior to doing this video, is I always like to try to find the positive off the tee guys and pair them up with negative putters, and then include them in a lineup. And now that I say that, it reminds me, I actually created another page that has a player pool, like different player pools to select golfers from. So if you were with me in the strategy video, I had said these are trends that I had been following. You wanted to go, or you wanted to find, basically if I went back to 2020 and even looked here, if we were looking at stats, you always wanted to find, some positive off the tee guys with negative putting. So like usually you wanted to find 2. Then you also wanted to find 1 to 2 golfers that have positive off the tee, positive putting. So as I come down here, like last year we had that. And then you also want to find someone who has negative putting or negative off the tee, positive putting. So there we go. And so that's what these player pools kind of look at. And that was just looking at last year, but take my word, it goes back to 2019. It also goes back the last couple tournaments. Finding these golfers, really, it makes sense. So like off the tee, positive off the tee, negative putting, negative off the tee, positive putting, positive, 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 so on and so forth. Here's positive off the tee, still inside the top 10, negative putting. So there you go. You got your 2 there. We could almost come down to here at 11th place and find our other negative off the tee, positive putting. So I created this player pool stuff. Positive off the tee, positive putting, pick 2. Positive off the tee, positive or negative putting, pick 2. And then negative off the tee, positive putting, pick 1 to 2. And then I just had a negative off the tee, negative putt. And all that revolved around were season-long stats because that was easy to analyze from last year's tournament as well as the tournament prior to, or before that one. So 2019, 2018, and, well, I should say 2020, 2019, those 2 years, I was able to analyze those. And again, this is me doing this analysis back to the CJ Cup. Finding this information, it's just been a common occurrence. So that's what I kind of used. And again, if I show you guys positive off the tee, positive putting, negative, negative, that's its own thing. But we have another positive, positive, negative, negative. Where am I going to find these guys that I'm trying to find? Okay, here's a negative off the tee, positive putting. Again, now I have positive off the tee, negative putting. So those are my 2 guys that work for that. We also have another positive off the tee, negative putting. So going back to the player pool, I also have this sorted by results. So their position, what the sweet spot rank score was. And if we were to follow the rules, pick 2, can we get there easily? I don't know if you can get to Robert Streb, but let's say Harris English and Jason Day show up. Like those are golfers we like. Now, those are in the same grouping as Tyrrell Hatton, Russell Henley, Webb Simpson, Joaquin Niemann, Sung J M, Louis Oosthuizen, Brian Harmon. Those are all highly ranked golfers in the sweet spot model. But you could, if you're looking at tee time pairings, pair up English and Day together and then move on to the next bucket. Now, out of these golfers, is there anyone that you would actually play? And it's probably no. I mean, I was really big on Wyndham Clark and Scott Piercy. They finished okay. And that's not a terrible way to go when picking those golfers. But let's see here. If we were to go Jason Day, Harris English, Scott Piercy, Wyndham Clark, I'm at 33,400. Now, I know I just picked these random golfers to you guys, but these were golfers in my player pools, in my own personal pools when I was creating lineups. So looking at those golfers, obviously then I come here looking at negative off the tee, positive putting. My favorite golfer was Peter Malnati, and he was doing really decent until the weekend. He was up at the top of the leaderboard, thought he was going to do really well. But let's say, you didn't like Malnati. He's 15th ranked on the sweet spot ranking within this, column. But if we scroll through everybody, you can see no one really had a high rank. I mean, it went from Malnati 15 to Munoz 25. You know, there weren't a lot of high-ranked golfers here. Honestly, getting to Zach Johnson, he could have been like the 5th best, you know, rank inside this entire bucket. Let's say we wanted to pick him. Obviously, we certainly could have pretty easily. You know, we put him in our player pool, and now we have we're sitting at 41,400, which gives us $8,600 left to pick another golfer. And really, if I'm looking at everyone, I mean, Kevin Kisner's the obvious spot, right? Works out fine. And if we were to do something like that, it was easy. Well, let's see. Obviously, I have this color coded by bucket. So Kevin Kisner was a last year 2. Zach Johnson was a last year 5. Scott Piercy last year 1. Wyndham Clark last year 1. English a last year 2. And Jason Day a last year 1. Let's see how that would have performed, because if we were following this whole, you know, process, we could have gotten there. So let's see. Let's go to 2021. So we want Jason Day. We're gonna start there. Jason Day, Harris English. I do remember Zach Johnson being there, as did Kevin Kisner, and it was Scott Piercy and Wyndham Clark. So Scott Piercy and Wyndham Clark, 594.5. We would have won a GPP. So I create 100 lineups, and usually I stick with a core of golfers. So Scott Piercy was in one of my cores, as was actually, let me go here, open up. I'll let you see what my lineups were. So I have this DK lineup construction sheet that makes creating lineups really easy for me. Keeps track of stuff. So if I were to zoom in, usually my top 5. So this whole column are nothing but 6K golfers, and I don't own anyone more than 10%. That is a rule that I do. So I create a core, really of 5 golfers, 16 times, you know. So basically I start with a core of 5. I don't care who's over here, honestly. I really don't. If you are one of those that just firmly believe that you should pick a core of 6 golfers and include a 6K golfer in there, I think you need to give your head a shake. Like, that's nuts. But either way, hey, to each their own, and that's totally fine. For me, not gonna do it. So I do 5, and you can see what my first core was. I create usually 6 cores. That's 96 lineups. 6 times 16, 96. This one had Webb, Henley, Clark, Malnati, and Harold Varner III. I wish I would have pivoted from Harold Varner III to somebody else, because obviously he didn't do well. If I would have went with Piercy, I would have had a lot of golfers making the cut all the way through. Probably would have cashed decent. My other core was Hatton, English, Rose, McCarthy, Piercy. Not terrible either. And obviously you can see some of the pivots that I had made. Unfortunately, you know, maybe I should have went with Hatton and Day instead of pivoting from Harris English to Jason Day. Like that just didn't work out. So that was one of the cores. Another one was Simpson, Piercy, Austin Cook, Harris English, McCarthy. That didn't seem terrible either. Henley, Neiman, Redmond, Munoz, and Stewart Cink. Now, Redmond was a golfer that I just had FOMO on, and that's why I included him in a a core. It's just because I didn't want, if he did hit, I wanted to hit with the best lineup I could create with him, and unfortunately this one obviously did not do well at all. And I believe I have 2 more cores. So it was Neiman, English, Hughes, Davis, Louis Oosthuizen. Not terrible, but obviously didn't do well. And then I finished it up with Webb, Henley, Malnati, Clark, and Piercy. So that one was a good one. But none of those golfers really finished decent enough to win money. I think I did win money with these lineups. But it never really came to fruition. Nothing ever really came from it. So those were my 6 cores. And unfortunately we just didn't get there with the right guys. I did have a Streb lineup. So if I were to go back and look, I look up Streb. Here's my one Streb lineup. And that consisted of Neiman, English, Hughes, Davis, and Lowry. So 2 people missed the cut, Davis and Hughes. Unfortunate. You know, Robert Streb could have been anywhere in all of these lineups. He just happened to be on a lineup that had 2 missed cuts. So that's unfortunate. I did have one Villegas lineup, but that's really not worth mentioning. All in all, it was good. You know, I really liked the process creating these player pools. Now, you could have went any route with them. Let's not kid ourselves. We're not going to select any of these guys in the 6K range, honestly. But we could have easily gone to, like, you know, if we're looking at this whole entire bucket, you know, I really liked Malnati. He was the best ranked, you know, golfer in this. But if we were to just remove that and maybe look at some of our higher priced guys, you know, we had Munoz, Justin Rose, obviously Zach Johnson, Ian Poulter. Those are some of our highest priced guys there. Maybe it's easy to get to Zach Johnson. You know, if you do the eyeball test, do you like Poulter? Do you like Munoz? How about Rose? Like, you know, yes and no. Or maybe you grab one of them in your cores, say like Justin Rose, and you pivot to like a Zach Johnson. Maybe that's what I'll do next week or the next tournament, is I will use these columns here as my pivots. We'll see. I don't think that's exactly how we're going to do this, because we obviously have to incorporate, you know, our 6K golfers and try to mix those in like we did for this week. Because yeah, that's how you win a GPP, is getting on one of these guys like Robert Streb. So all in all, like, the rankings look good, you know, for guys inside the top 20. You know, Kyle Stanley to me, Kyle Stanley is the only guy that really stands out. Okay, Kyle Stanley and Bernd Wiesberger, the only guys that really stand out inside the top 10 that weren't ranked that well. Wiesberger might just not have that many starts, and maybe this is a course that really matched his eye. I don't know much about Wiesberger, honestly. I just really copy the stats that I can, and, you know, present them to you guys, analyze them myself, try to figure out, you know, the best plays from there. I mean, he didn't have terrible stats. He was negative off the tee, negative putting, so that's kind of why I didn't really like him. But he was positive tee to green, so maybe his stats need to be a little bit better. Just trying to look at all the scores and why nothing really showed up that great. Okay, so his recent tee to green and strokes gained off the tee weren't good. Okay, all right. Did I include those as my points too? Okay, nope. Either way, maybe Burns should be better than what that looks, but I'm not going to worry about it. So let's see here. What else do I want to cover? I don't know. I think all in all, everything looked decent to me. Everything looked fine. It was just finding the right golfers, obviously. I don't think any one of us is going to get to the optimal lineup and leave, you know, what was it? We're not going to leave $6,100 on the table. It's not going to happen. Perhaps maybe if you pivot from one golfer to another, but even if we went with some of those golfers that we talked about being in a core, you know, obviously if we went like Harris English and Jason Day, that's probably our best bet, is to start there and go somewhere else. But if we went there and say, you know, our next step was maybe it was Zach Johnson, maybe it was Kevin Kisner, you know, that's doable. But I don't know. I guess I don't know how I get there. You know, Zach Johnson and Kevin Kisner were not golfers that would have been, you know, like really looked at as a core. Although, I mean, Kevin Kisner's sweet spot score was not terrible, so obviously it could have been easy to get to him. I bet I liked more golfers around Zach Johnson than where he was, but I don't know. It's always difficult to speculate, you know, where we could have gone, where whatever. Perhaps maybe we change some of these around a little bit. I mean, I do like pick 2. I like pick 2, and I like 1 to 2. To me, that makes sense. But if that last position in our lineup is just going to be a random 6K golfer, man, hard to get to someone like Kevin Kisner, you know, because you're probably more associated with these picks up here. Maybe this is more of a 1 to 2, pick 1 to 2, honestly. And then it's pick 2, and then pick 1 to 2. And we could also call this like pick 0 to 1, perhaps. And we'll try to use this when we create more lineups. But I would have started with 2 guys here, perhaps, and maybe 2 guys here. I mean, I guess like Piercy and Clark were the best ranked golfers in that one. Some of the best ranked golfers. I see Matthew Fitzpatrick here. Martin Laird is there. So I don't know. Difficult to say, but I guess, I mean, I want to say find your value plays everywhere that you can. And maybe that's where I'll start looking at, is looking at price tags and seeing where they're ranked, comparing, you know, the sweet spot score to their sweet spot rank to their salary rank, and just see who has value. You know, who has value relative to their salary, you know, or sweet spot rank, however I'm trying to word that. That is probably a good way to go about it. So maybe in the future, we'll look at doing something like that. I guess you can't get there with Zach Johnson, and you can't get there with Kevin Kisner, because I know 8,600 and 8,000 are not your top 30 salaries. So I don't know, but that is all I have for you guys for the review. Again, I wanted to cover, you know, the optimal lineup versus the $1 GPP lineup, kind of go over the strategy portion of my, well, not so much strategy portion, but go over some of the things I talked about in the strategy video, just to see how we could have got to some of these golfers. And I think in the future, I will continue covering, or I will cover now, you know, these buckets. So then you guys at home, when you look at this, you can go, oh, yeah, I really like, you know, Keegan Bradley, or I like Wyndham Clark, you know, and that just gives you more confidence in playing those guys to, you know, compare with some of these guys over here. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. So thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you in a couple weeks at the Mayakoba Golf Classic. All right, bye.